Hello and welcome back to online learning session. This is part 2 of the total video series. Let us move ahead and start learning. Students, as we have already seen the classification of resources, today we are going to learn about all these types of resources. So first topic is, on the basis of origin, resources are classified into two types. The first one is biotic resources. The second one is abiotic resources. Biotic resources are the resources which have life, for example, green plants, animals and human beings. As you see, abiotic resources, it's completely the opposite of biotic resources. Resources which don't have life, for example, air, water, etc. Now let us move on to the second classification of resources, which is on the basis of exhaustibility. That is, renewable resources and non-renewable resources. When we come to renewable resources, we learn that these resources get renewed or replenished in nature. The examples include air, water, solar energy received from the sun. And non-renewable resources are the ones which do not get renewed, do not get replenished, and have a limited reserve inside the Earth's crust. For example, mineral energy resources such as copper, iron ore, coal, and petroleum. You already know that all these mineral resources and energy resources are limited. So that is why they can't be renewed. Now let us move ahead. On the basis of ownership, resources are classified into four types. The first one is individual resources. Now, as the word suggests, resources which are owned by an individual are known as individual resources. For example, a private company, houses, plots. Second one is community owned resources. And again, as the name suggests, resources collectively owned by a community in the society. Let us take the example of villages. In villages, you will find grazing grounds, burial grounds, ponds, etc. So all these resources belong to the community of that village. In cities, you will find parks, picnic spots, playgrounds, where you all can go and do whatever you want to do. Next one is national resources. Now technically all the resources belong to the nation. But there are some urban development authorities which get empowered by the government to acquire land, and that is for the development of a region. All the mineral resources, water resources, forests, wildlife within the political boundaries and oceanic area up to 12 nautical miles, that is 22.2 kilometers, from the coast are termed as territorial waters, and resources therein belong to the nation. Next one is international resources. Resources which are regulated by international organizations through regulations. These kinds of resources are known as international resources. Now students, there are different types of regions in the world where different countries can claim that, for example, this X region comes within my territory, or that Y region comes within my territory. So in order to regulate these international resources, international organizations come into force. It is the oceanic resources beyond 200 nautical miles of the exclusive economic zone belong to open ocean, and no individual country can utilize these without the concurrence of international institutions. So this is what I was talking about, that beyond 200 nautical miles of the exclusive economic zone of any country, any other country can claim the resources in that region as theirs. And so many countries can. So here disputes may arise at international levels. So there are lots of international institutions which have come together and they regulate the utilization of these resources. Now let us move ahead. I hope that the concepts are clear. I would also like to tell you that just do not rely completely on these videos. You have to go through your textbooks as you have learnt in your previous classes, especially as taught by me in the respective subjects. So students, you already know that you have to strictly follow the NCERT textbook word by word. And then all these lectures, all these videos, all these notes are there to serve as helping hands. Let us move ahead. Students, I would like you to look at these pictures. These pictures are resources on the basis of ownership. And here comes a question for you. You have to identify them and categorize them in your notebook. This is your task regarding this slide. And remember students, I will be checking it. So please do not try to skip all these paths. So here, as you can see, there is a house. The second one is an amusement park. Now if we look at this picture, this is a plot. I want you now to identify the rest of the pictures. What is this? What does this picture suggest? And what does this picture suggest? You have to identify these pictures and categorize them accordingly in your notebook. Now let us move on. Here comes our next classification of resources, which is on the basis of status of development. Now on the basis of status of development, again we have 4 different types of resources. They are potential resources, developed resources, stock, and reserves. Now let us try to learn what is meant by potential resources. Resources which are found in a region but not utilized. Let me repeat. Resources which are found in a region but they are not utilized. For example, Rajasthan and Gujarat have enormous scope of solar energy development and wind power development, but this development has not taken place in these regions so far. So wind and solar energy in Rajasthan and Gujarat are potential resources. I hope this is clear to you. Now let's move ahead and we'll move to learning developed resources. Now let us learn this. Resources which have been surveyed for utilization. Now these resources are surveyed. It means what? That their quantity and quality are determined. You go to a region, you check what types of resources are found in that region, then the quantity and quality of those resources are determined, but development depends on technology and the level of feasibility. What does this mean? This means that if we have the proper technology and there is a sound level of feasibility, only then these resources could be developed. Clear? Now again, here is a question. You need to refer to your textbook and find out some regions and examples of developed resources. Now we'll move on to learning stock resources. Now what do we actually mean by stock resources? See, students, materials in our nature have the potential to satisfy human needs. Of course, they are only known as resources, but we do not have the technology to utilize them till date. So it's very clear, materials which have the potential to satisfy human needs, but we don't have technology to utilize them. These kinds of resources have been termed as stock. So if we don't have the technology to utilize them, there's a question for you. Are we using these kinds of resources right now? Yes or no? You have to answer this question. Now we'll move to learning reserves. Now what are reserves? Resources which are not put to use. Resources which are not put to use despite having the technology to do so. Resources which are not put to use despite having the proper technology to do so. Now, can you find some similarity or a point of difference between stock resources and reserve resources? Yes, students, they both have the potential to satisfy human needs. And let me repeat this question. This question is, you have to find out the difference between the stock and reserves, and for that you must first of all find out the similarity. And if it is a resource, obviously they have the potential to satisfy human needs, but the point of difference between stock and reserve is that as far as the stock resources are concerned, we don't have the technology to utilize them. But when we come to reserves, we have the technology to do so, but despite that these resources are not being put to use. This must be very clear, and this will form a question in your assignment. So please go through your textbook very carefully. Now let us see an example of stock resources. Water is a very good example of stock resources. Now what did we learn in stock resources? Let us get back. We have learned that materials which have the potential to satisfy human needs, but we don't have the technology. See students, the point to pick from here is we don't have the technology to utilize them. Now let us move on. Now, as you know that water is a compound of two gases, hydrogen and oxygen. Now hydrogen again is a very good fuel which can be used as a rich source of energy. Now here's a question. If water is a compound of two gases and it's quite easily available, so why don't we take out hydrogen from the compound and use it as a source of energy? We have not been able to do so because we have not possessed that technical know-how till date to use it for this purpose. Hence, this resource is considered to be a stock resource. Let me repeat. You have seen that water is a compound of two gases. The first gas is hydrogen and the second one is oxygen. Of course, let us write the formula. It's H2O, here is hydrogen and here is oxygen. So why don't we take this hydrogen out of this compound and use it as a fuel? We are not able to do so because we don't have the technology to do so till date. That is why this is a good example of stock resource. Let's move on to see some examples of reserve resources as well, so that you do not have any doubt regarding the difference between stock resources and reserve resources. See students, river water, let us consider river water. You know that river water can be used for generating hydroelectric power, but presently it is being utilized only to a limited extent. Of course, river water is being used for generating hydroelectric power, but in a limited extent. So water in the dams, forests, etc. can be considered as a reserve which can be used in the future.